Good afternoon, Survey Spatial members. Thank you so much for joining us on today's webinar. This is Module 5 of the Leadership Essential seminar series, and I know a majority of you who are online today have joined us over the last 5 to 6 weeks to listen in to Terry's presentation. As always, if you do have any questions at all throughout the webinar, please pop them in the Q&A box, and Terry will either answer these as we go along or at the end of the presentation. So I'd now like to invite Terry to speak with you.
Okay, thanks everybody. It's great to be back for the 5th installment of Leadership Essentials. And as I've said in every of the seminars that we've run, we're going to be about 45 minutes plus a bit more. If there's any questions you've got, please put them up in the chat. In the last seminar we had last week, some really, really good questions. You've also got the workbook, and as we go through today, we'll refer to pages in the workbook, so you've got a bit of a reference. The workbook's interactive, so I think take it away at your leisure and work through it. We've talked consistently over the 5 seminar sessions around building yourself a leadership practice. And one of the things I think that's really important, and it's the quote that I gave in the first seminar, and we've repeated it ever since, is a quote I think that sums up leadership. That great leaders are like the best conductors. They reach beyond the notes to reach the magic in the players. And I think that's what a leader in essence does. It reaches beyond the task, which is what a manager often does. It reaches beyond the task to find the magic in the players. So it's creating music. It's creating that magic. And whenever you've been in a high performance team, whenever you've been with a high performance leader, if you are a high performance leader, you will know what that feels like. You'll know the difference between that and being in a team that isn't or hasn't got good leadership. So I think it's really important that if you want to become a leader, you need to practice. You need to build your leadership practice. I'm not a great proponent that leaders are born. So is that nature versus nurture? I think most of it comes from nurturing. It's like when people say, oh, I'm highly intuitive. Some people are highly intuitive, and that is because they've observed what's happening around them and drawn conclusions from it. That generally is the basis of intuition. Same as with leadership. Leaders don't wake up one morning and go, I'm going to be a leader today. Because again, what we've talked about in these sessions is that under pressure, humans revert to learned behavior. And if your learned behavior is one of managing, like of managing details, managing things that happen, then it's very difficult for you under pressure to become a good leader unless you have trained yourself to do so. Because what will happen under pressure, you'll revert to learned behavior, which will be managing details. So let's do a quick recap, as we always do at the beginning of these sessions, is, on page 4, in that first seminar session, we talked about what makes a great leader. And one of the things that I think that is really critical, it's authenticity. Authenticity is the core of a good leader, because authenticity builds trust. And without trust, I have yet to see a leader who's effective. People will trust in the picture or in the vision of what that leader is talking about. So authenticity, humans relate to that, because often you'll find leaders, particularly political leaders, will make promises that have no relevance in reality. So authenticity. The next one I think is really critical is a duty of care. Duty of care is really, really important. And that sometimes can cause a bit of a conflict between you and the organization. It's a balance. But I think the great leaders are the leaders who focus on people. I was talking to a client about a week ago, and we were talking about this, and I said to him, talent triumphs over organizational structure every time. And he said, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, I have seen organizations that have had pretty average structures, like the structures don't help people get stuff done. And yet, because of the leadership of various people in that organization, people work their way around those challenges. They work their way around those difficulties to actually produce great results. On the other side, in this particular organization that I was talking to the chief executive, on the other side, I said, you have done lots of org structures. You've redesigned and redesigned and redesigned, and you're still not getting the performance. Why? Because your people aren't motivated. Your people aren't being led. Your people don't see what a vision of success is. They don't feel the authenticity, and they don't feel that the people you've got leading them care about them. They care about the stuff that gets done. So a good leader, in my opinion, is a person who has a duty of care to the people that they're leading. And then we've got the rest of them down there that you can go through, be the model. And that's a really big one, because you can't say to people, do what I say, but don't do what I do, because people go, hang on, that's not authentic. People model leaders' behaviors. One of the things we have talked about also is about, if you duck over to page 5, we talked about a manager, leader, and a coach. And I think that good leaders are also good coaches. And the model of coaching that I subscribe to is about being a connector coach. Now, a connector coach says, look, I don't know the answer to this. Why don't you go and talk to Terry? Terry has the answer. And that means something that a leader must have. The leader must have self-awareness and be comfortable in themselves. Often, and you've probably seen this, that there are leaders out there who won't let their people go and talk to other people because I'm the leader, I should know everything, which is not a good connector coach. So a leader, I think, to be a good coach needs to work on themselves. That's where the leadership practice comes from. You need to be able to ask yourself, as we've talked about in other sessions, what are my behaviors? What do I do when I get under pressure? What do I do when I get under stress? How do I react? Because when you know yourself, you can become authentic about it. And like, for example, I was talking to some people recently, and they said, so Terry, what is your authenticity about? And I said, well, I tend to operate at both ends of the spectrum. I'm like, if you talk to a lot of people, I'm very caring, kind, very generous, and very supportive. I'm a very good connector coach. At the other end of the spectrum, I can be quite hard-nosed, focused on people must operate within boundaries. Culture is really big. Values is really big. So I tend to operate at both ends. That's who I am. And I'm comfortable with that. But over the years, I've had so many people telling me, you need to be somewhere in the middle. Don't be at those two ends, be in the middle. And part of my journey as a leader has been trying to find in myself and be comfortable with myself operating in both those ends. Because I ask myself the question, am I operating with good intent? Am I operating with a duty of care? And the answer is yes. If it's not, then I need to go and examine why. So part of that is being confident in yourself. You only get confident in yourself by doing the work, by building the practice. So that's connector coaching. And I think, one of the things that we talked about on page 9, which is we've got that really great dynamics of leadership model, is that's a very good example of us reverting to learned behavior when under pressure. And it's natural, perfectly natural. When Randy White wrote the book Future of Leadership, and I was sitting with him in Charleston, North Carolina, and we were talking about the research that he'd done for this book. Randy said, look, this is what happened. I drew it up as a model, and he said, yeah, that sums it up pretty well. So if you work your way up from the bottom, and it's only probably the billionaires' children that work their way down from the top, and I don't know if we got too many billionaires' kids out there today. I can't imagine it. But most of us have worked our way up from the bottom. So we've been very task focused. We've been very managerial about what we do. And when we move into a leadership role, we've got to change to stop focusing on the task, to focus on the outcome. We've got to stop focusing on process and systems and focus on people. And that's a shift. And it's a shift that unless we work with ourselves, you're going to keep reverting to learned behavior under pressure, which means you dive back down to where you were comfortable once before. And if you're comfortable as a team leader before, that's where you'll dive back to. And that's okay. It's normal. It's natural. But find yourself and catch yourself doing it and then go, how do I actually change that? And it's a learning process for us all. So that model is a very good model to keep in mind on page 9, the dynamics of leadership. The other one we talk about, and this is probably one of the most, I think, used phrases in the world today, high performance teams. We talk about them, you hear it on the news, you hear every sports team, every coach being talked about high performance. And yet often when you look at what is happening with some of those teams, or you're looking at some of the organizations where the managers, the chief executive, or people are talking about we're a high performance organization, you go, Now over on page 11, you've got a really good example of what a high performance team looks like. And this is a model that is taken from Patrick Lencioni's work. He did a lot of work around the dysfunctions of a team. And the opposite of that is what we have here, is about what creates high performance. Now, the fascinating thing that you see here is number 1. It's the same as authenticity that we had right at the beginning as a core element of leadership, is trust. Humans relate to people they trust. A leader who paints a picture of what success looks like, and people in the team trust that, and they trust that person, then they'll move forward. Now, often in teams, there's conflict. How do you manage conflict? Well, I was having this discussion recently, and I said one of the key things that I have found in my experience that manages conflict well is around cultural values, the values of an organization. Now, probably there's people out there today listening who are rolling their eyes when I say this, because they go, well, we've got values, but we don't live them. That's the secret. You have to live your values. You have to live your values. So we're going through a process in our organization at the moment where we have some really great values that have driven us probably for nearly 15 years. And I said, we need to revisit those in January to make sure that they're still relevant. One of them is make a difference, which I've mentioned before. So if somebody in our organization wasn't committed to making a difference, they wouldn't work with us because they don't fit. And one of the things I think in the changes that we've seen in our organization, especially with working from home, is that we do need to have a value incorporated in there about what people own personally. And what it does in a team, it means you can master conflict, because let's imagine, go back to making a difference. If you're making a difference, then the how you make the difference is really a discussion point, is not conflictual. And I feel that when people are aligned around the bigger purpose, some of the stuff that would cause conflict is not as relevant. And of course, it is relevant and you need to work through. And if you've got somebody who is completely not in sync with your values, then you need to ask yourself, why are they in the team at all? Why are they in the organization at all? So achieving commitment is another big one. It's around, again, you're all working towards the same goal. The secret of a leader is to be able to paint the picture of what that goal looks like. And, I use the example of Martin Luther King. He didn't stand up at the Washington Memorial and say, I have a really interesting strategic plan that could be implemented. He said, I have a dream. And he went on to talk about that. People buy into word pictures, and we talked about, and we'll cover it over in the next few pages. It's our limbic system. Our limbic system relates to pictures, feelings, and emotions. Embracing accountability, and that's personal ownership. I take ownership of that. One of the most common things that I've seen in our Kiwi culture is that often people don't take ownership. It's somebody else's problem. It's the government's problem. It's the council's problem. It's somebody else's problem. No, own it yourself. And people who own stuff that happens in the world around them and in their lives, They see transformations because that is where growth exists. That's where growth exists. And then as a result of that, if you've got all of those in place, you can focus on getting results. So all of this is a picture, and it's a journey of where we're going to with 14 and 15, pages 14 and 15, which is touching on what we've just been talking about so far, is that we all have belief systems. And our belief systems can change. Our value systems probably don't, but our belief systems can change. If you believed the world was flat and I took you up into space and you looked at it and went, wow, the world is round, you would change your belief. Interestingly, a lot of our beliefs, the patterns, I'm not saying the absolute facts of them, but much of the patterns of what we have today come from our childhood, our upbringing, our culture. And what we do when we go through life experiences, we filter those life experiences through those beliefs, or we filter the beliefs through the life experiences. So they become self-justifying in their own way. Now, why is this important for a leader? Well, a leader needs to be able to say, is my belief system relevant to what is in front of me? Because the world is changing so much. We're living in the greatest period of change in human history. And so you need to say to yourself, are my belief systems still relevant? I was having dinner with a friend a while back, and he is a big vinyl person. He loves, the vinyl music. And we were talking about that, and I said, well, I only listen to Apple Music. I used to have 1,000 CDs. I only have 200 now of CDs that are really unusual. And he's like, but no, you need to go onto vinyl. And we're having this discussion around belief systems. As far as he's concerned, he would never use Spotify or Apple Music because he's a vinyl person. And yet one day they'll probably stop making turntables and he'll be sitting there going, what do I do with all my vinyls? So part of it is around being adaptable, being able to reframe, being able to challenge the stuff that may be important to you now, but you ask yourself, is it relevant to what I'm dealing with in the future? Now, the part of our brain that processes a lot of what we do that affects our belief system is our neocortex, and our limbic system. And our limbic system thinks in pictures, it thinks in feelings, and it is our flight and flight part of our brain. So it is the part that under stress or pressure reverts us to learned behavior. Neocortex is our logical part of our brain, and it works really well when we're not stressed. So part of what we need to do as a leader is we need to be able to articulate to the people that we are leading in ways that communicate with them. So if you're dealing with a highly stressed team, giving them lots of facts and figures around the logicality of why they should do something different, or why they should embrace this change, or it's probably not going to make a lot of difference to them, because they're just going to have it going like this over their head, because their limbic part, the limbic system part of their brain is going, hang on, that means I could lose my house. That means I could lose my job. That means I may not be able to do that. It means I may not be able to do that, because that's what's going back into their belief system. That's where the reference point is. So good leaders build trust. What does trust do? Trust actually makes you feel safe. So if you're feeling unsafe or vulnerable by the things that are happening around, and a leader comes and says, listen, it's not as bad as we think, and I believe in where we're going, and I believe in what we're projecting out into the future. This is what we're trying to achieve by doing this. People go, okay, I trust you, Terry, and you're authentic about it. I've seen how you operate in the past, and I trust it. So now I'm much safer. I feel less vulnerable. If I feel safer and I feel less vulnerable, my neocortex, my facts, figures, and logic and data part of my brain feels comfortable dealing with it. And at that particular point, you can have a conversation that is based around facts, figures, data, and logic, and people will hear it. So that is the secret, I think, of a good leader. It's about making people feel safe, so that they can continue a journey. And we'll talk about this a little later today in what I call the comfort zone model. And we've got a really great one on page 18. I love that. That's around the law of limited performance, is that, people soon discover the level of performance that their managers will settle for, and they gravitate towards it. And managers then assume that this is all the people are capable of achieving. And so they stop challenging them. So they both reinforce what the other believes. And now, if you look at any great coach, and the example I gave in seminar 1 was about Carlos Kleber, the conductor, who had a waiting list of orchestras to conduct. People wanted him to come and conduct. And yet he was the most demanding taskmaster in rehearsals. He would spend an hour on one bar of music till the orchestra got it right. And when he went on stage, he said, "Play with your heart." Why orchestras wanted him to do the conducting of them was he challenged them, he stretched them, he pushed them to interpret and play music in different ways. And as a consequence, they became a better orchestra. So that's part of, I think, your role as a leader is about challenging. And then we've got some really good tools that you can use in terms of coaching. SBI, that's a fantastic tool when you're having challenging conversations, when you need to sit down and go situation, behavior, impact. It takes the emotion out of it. It gets that person moving away from that limbic system, that emotive state, into a more neocortex state, because you're dealing with the situation, the behavior, and the impact. It's not about the person. It's not about what you feel. It's about the situation, the behavior, and the impact. Another great coaching tool is DOMA. And DOMA is direction, opportunity, motivation, and ability. And if you have none of those, if you especially don't have direction, then it's very difficult for people to achieve. And one of the key things I think with leaders is not only being able to set the direction, because most people can do that, but it's being able to create a picture of what success looks like. So you take that direction and you create a picture of what success looks like. One of the things that we do a lot of in coaching is saying to people, what do you want your legacy to be in life? And it's remarkable how many people have no idea. But what you want your legacy to be is very much like a picture of success, because as Stephen Covey said, it's your north. And if you're heading north, then you're feeling really good about life and what's happening in life, and you feel aligned. But if you're not, you'll know it. And it's okay to go northeast or northwest to stray off course, because you still know where north is. So it is with a leader who's setting direction. Create the picture of what success looks like for that direction. And then be able to articulate that back into your people, into your team, because that will motivate them. And part of your role then as a coach and as a leader is to be able to grow their talent, grow their ability, and leverage that. And so another coaching model you can use as a leader, I think it's a very, very valuable one, is the GROW model, which is goal, reality, options, and a will or way forwards. So again, it's very similar, but it's possibly a little more granular in the sense that you're saying to the person, okay, there's the goal. You've already set the direction. You know what the picture of success is. What is the goal? What is the reality? Very important point. A lot of people don't live in reality. They live in perceptions of reality. And I've always said that if you deal with reality, you may not like it, but you can deal with it. And generally speaking, when you start dealing with reality, you find that the picture that your limbic system is creating of the situation is much smaller and not as bad as what it's telling you once you start dealing with the reality. And that enables you to create a will or a way forwards. I always remember, and I probably said this in one of the previous sessions, I worked with a major gym, and they said their best time of the year when they made all their profit was in January, February, because people came in after New Year with their New Year resolutions, took out their subscription for the first 3 months, attended once or twice and never came back. So they had the desire, but not the will. So the will is important, and we'll talk later today about some tools you can use to get that will in place. So page 27, we're talking active listening. Very important, as we said last session, is about active listening, is around work out where your default listening style is. To get into active listening, you need to be able to ask lots of questions. You need to be able to ask those questions in a way with open-ended questions that enable you to get feedback. And we've given you some of those questions that you can use in pages 32, going 33, 34, 35, and through to 36. So let's start looking at what we want to cover today, which I think is really important. So one of the things on page 39 that's really important is around using a smart planning technique in order to get that will. Remember I said about the will, rather than the desire, it's the will to move forward. How do you do it? Now there's an old quote, isn't it? And that's on page 38 from Peter Drucker, which says, what is measured gets done. And that's generally true in life. So using SMART is specific. M is for measurable, A is for attainable, R is relevant, and T is time-based. Now, it's really interesting. We built a program, and I mentioned this last time, called Vision to Action, something like 30 years ago, and it's been transformational in strategic planning. It's not like your normal strategic plan where people produce 30 pages of what they're going to do over the next year. This is really simple. You have 5 things that will move the dial over the next 18 months. You get agreement on exactly what that is. If you say, we're going to improve customer service, what does customer service mean to everybody around the table? And you hammer it out till you all agree on the one thing that customer service is. Some people might say answering calls within 20 seconds. Some people might say it's fixing problems. Another person might say responding to customer needs. But we work out the one thing we want to be known for, which maybe is answering calls within 30 seconds. How do we measure it? Is it attainable? And challenging that, because you might go, well, to do that, we need to put on another 10 people, which we don't have the budget for. So then it's working out what is attainable within that framework. Looking at what is relevant to it, because under those 5 things that move the dial, we always put 5 actions that need to be taken to make that happen, the 5 big actions. Interestingly, in a lot of planning, people focus on lots and lots and lots of detail. I don't think you need it. I call it the domino effect. If you can knock over one domino, the domino will knock over others. So you don't need to actually detail the color of the domino, how many dots it's got on it, you know, what the size of the domino is. You just got to say it's a domino, and if we knock that domino over, it'll keep knocking others over. So get the 5 big actions underneath it, which is what is relevant and what is not relevant. And often I see when we're looking at planning as leaders, people want to focus on what they're comfortable with, which often may not be relevant. And then timeframes. Specifically, when will this be done? Now, I've seen in many plannings, and probably you have as well, by the 3rd quarter. Now, the 3rd quarter is like whatever, whenever. But you put a date on it. It must be done by the 11th of November, 2024. That's non-negotiable. And so people now are looking at that date and going, that's real. And the rules that you put around these things is if you can't achieve them, and this is as a leader, I would be saying to teams that when you do set these goals, if you can't achieve this by the 11th of November, you need to come back and get permission from me or from the team to change the date. And if we say, no, we're not changing the date, then you could ask for permission to get more resources to meet that date. And if we go, yep, that's fine, or no, it's not. But if you arrive at the 11th of November and don't achieve it, in my world, and I've said this many times, and whenever we've run this vision to action planning process using this technique, we describe the person as a promise breaker. Now, a promise breaker is quite a serious thing. You know, you don't want to go around breaking promises. And the interesting thing that I have found in my experience, is that when you use the SMART technique for planning, whether it be for yourself or whether it be for your teams, especially as a leader for your teams, and you're constantly revisiting the date around attainability, around relevance, so you keep revisiting that, people start achieving. And guess what happens when people start achieving? They actually start changing their feeling and their thinking. Success breeds success. And I mentioned it was the last seminar, the seminar before, Peter Burling. When he was being interviewed, Team New Zealand, Peter Burling, America's Cup, they interviewed him and said, "Are you hoping that you'll win today?" And he said, "No, we don't hope we'll win, we expect to win." And I think that was a really, really relevant comment. We expect to win. So what happens is that when you find people that are continuously successful, what actually happens is that people's mindset changes to a success mindset, which means I can do stuff. I can achieve that. I did an exercise about 9 months ago, and it was one of those things is that occasionally in my leadership practice, I need to remind myself of what I've done, because sometimes things that are happening around you start wearing you down a little bit. Anyway, it was about 9 months ago, and I sat down and I did a list of all the things that people told me were impossible to be done. They said, they can't be done, you won't achieve that, not possible. I did a list of them, and I had a really long list. And I sat back and I looked at that and I went, wow, I have achieved that success mindset. What am I doing now to continuously keep doing this? And that was really like an energy boost to me, because it was reinforcing the fact that I can succeed. I can do the stuff that other people say can't be done. And I do it by thinking differently. I do it by doing little steps. I do it by setting timelines on it. I do it by actually all the things we're talking about here today. So if you are looking to do that and you want to create this success mindset for yourself, try using the SMART goal setting technique. So get it specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. One of the things we say there on page 40 is set your goals in writing. Type them out. Set them in front of you so that you can see them, that they're relevant, that you're looking at them, you know what you've got to achieve. So every morning I will go through and look at what I've got in terms of goals and say, okay, how are we going on this? And again, I think use a concept like North, is that no goal is ever achieved in a straight line. It doesn't happen. And yet often I see so many people saying to teams or to individuals, their leaders are saying to them, this is what we need to do. It's very structured. The best results I've seen is set the goal and then let people find their way towards it with coaching and support. But particularly as a leader, identify what that goal looks like as a picture of success, and then work with people towards achieving it. One of the things that I think great coaches are good at doing, and they're great leaders as well, is that they're very good at being people whisperers. They're actually able to sit or walk or talk, or it doesn't have to be highly structured. It could be, let's go and grab a coffee. And on the way down to the coffee, the leader and coach says to the person, Terry, I noticed that you do this. Have you ever thought about doing it this way? And Terry goes, no, I haven't, no. Well, do you think it would work? And so it's that people whispering. It's helping the individual identify on the picture of success and how they will get there. Also, personally, and for your organization, I think it's a really good one on page 41. We've got there a model. It's an interactive model in your workbook you can use. Set out the objective, set out the measurement, set out the actions, and the completion date. Now, there's a secret here. Don't do any more than 5 objectives. And underneath the actions of each objective, don't do any more than 5. Now, why is that a secret? Well, in the human mind, we have our conscious mind, which can generally handle 2 things at once. So you can listen to me talking and think about what you're going to have for dinner. right? So it's great. That's what humans do. In our subconscious mind, it can handle about 7 things, but probably realistically, it's somewhere around about 5 or 6, but let's say 5. I think 5 is the magic number, but that's only my opinion. And once we get above, say, 5 or 7, we go, psh, we can't handle it. So what is stress? Stress is generally when you look out into the future or look out in front of you and you see more than 7 things that need to be attended to, or 7 things that are impacting on your life. That's when you get stress. And if you've ever watched people coming back from holiday into an organization and they've been away, say, for 3 or 4 weeks, and they walk in and they've got a desk and their desk is piled up with stuff, they'll probably do 2 things. They'll either sort their desk into piles, and if you count the piles, it's probably 5 or 6. The piles may not make much sense or general sense, but it makes them feel good. Or alternatively, they're going off and get a cup of coffee and talk to people so they can avoid that, because they've looked at that and see more than 7 things and go, shh. So part of writing this down and identifying 5 and 5 actions is that your mind and your brain can handle this, because all you're seeing in front of you is 5 things. And as you achieve one objective, or as you achieve an action, you can replace it with another objective or another action. So you're constantly working at a flow of 5. So it's a really good tool, or a good way to look at planning. So the most successful planning I've seen is when you look at this. And that's also a key part of what we'll talk about a little later, deliberative practice. Now, dreams plus reality plus commitment equals success. And we've got over the page, on page 43, a performance model. But before we go there, let's have a look at page 42, which is a 30-day commitment. Now, this is a really good tool for you to use if you want to reframe how you lead people, you want to reframe how you think, you want to reframe how you coach, and you want to reframe your leadership practice. Now, the 30-day goal is simply that over 30 days, you create a new habit. Now, how does this work? There's a secret to how it works. So you set your 30-day goal and you say, what will I achieve, and the completion date. So let's imagine my 30-day goal, and I'm going to horrify some people now, I will not eat ice cream. So yeah, I know there's people now falling out of their seats listening to me going, Terry, you can't say that in public. Anyway, my 30-day goal is, let's use it for an example. Let's say my 30-day goal is to not eat ice cream. What will I achieve? I will probably lose 2 kilos of weight. Completion date is in 30 days. Now, how this works is don't do too many. Maybe do 1 or 2 to start with and see how you go. But every night before you go to sleep, you go, did I eat ice cream today? And if your child was eating ice cream and you picked the spoon up and had a little bite off it, you go back to 0. If you say, no, I didn't touch ice cream today, you tick it off. Now, the secret is you must do 30 days continuously without a break. 30 days continuously without a break. And if you do have a break in that, you go back to 0. Now, trust me, that on your 4th time, you're at 20 days. Guess what you're going to be thinking about intensely? You're going to be thinking about, I'm not going to touch ice cream. There is no way I'm going to go back to 0 again and start again. Now, I did that. And I can actually tell you, I did that with ice cream because I love ice cream. But the problem is that ice cream loves me as well. And so I decided about 3 years ago, I really needed to do that. So I did the 30-day goal on ice cream. At the end of the 30 days, I did it about 4 times, and then I finally got to my 30 days. But I'd made a pact with myself. At the end of the 30 days, I was going to buy a nice big tub of chocolate chip ice cream, which I love, and I was going to eat that. I got to the end of 30 days, and if you gave me that tub, I couldn't touch it. I wasn't interested in ice cream. Do I still eat ice cream? Yeah, I still do. Do I like it? Yeah, I do when I eat it. But I don't have the desire to eat it anymore. So I've achieved my goal. So I can choose to eat it or not. And often I just won't. So I might eat ice cream, if I'm lucky, once every month or 2 months. So again, it's what works for you. It can be the way you think about things. It can be the way you speak. It can be the way you do stuff. It doesn't have to be around food. It can be around anything. But what it's really doing is rewiring your mind and reframing your thinking so that you as a leader can actually work in the best space that can provide a duty of care to your people and success to your teams and people. Now we turn to page 42 and 43, on page 43. This is my favorite model. This is a high performance model. Why it's called a high performance model is virtually every high performance team, every high performance individual would use this model. Now, there's a quote being attributed to Albert Einstein. I understand he didn't say it, but it's attributed to him anyway. You've probably seen the t-shirt which says, if I keep doing the same old stuff and expecting a different result, that's the definition of insanity. So the definition of insanity is doing the same old stuff and hoping to get a different result. So this is what this model is based on. So E plus R. A good question just popped up on the chat. Do you believe that culture eats strategy for breakfast? Yes, I do. I don't believe you don't need strategy. I think you do. But in the world that we live in today, events around us change so quickly that culture and a team that's united in culture will respond much more quickly and much more effectively than teams that don't have a culture but focus on strategy. The brain versus the heart, it's the limbic versus the neocortex. Limbic will always trump, in my opinion, strategy. So that's my opinion. Now, we could probably have a debate on this for quite a while, but in my experience, I've seen it happen so many times that teams just take ownership of what they're doing, and it doesn't matter what happens around them, they just make it happen. So let's come back to the performance model. So E plus R equals O. So let's work out, you want an outcome. Now, you can't change the event, generally speaking. Let's imagine your organization is going to go through change. I can't imagine you rocking up to the senior leadership team and saying, let's stop the change because nobody really likes it. So there's an event that happens. So the event generally is going to happen. What kind of outcome we get is based on how we respond to it. Now, that word's important. Respond, not react. Not react. React comes from our belief system. That's what we've always done. Response is opening up a gap between the event and what you do to work out what kind of outcome you want. So a very good and simple example is road rage. Now, I know none of you out there have ever experienced road rage. So road rage is when somebody cuts, so I'll explain it so you know. When road rage is when somebody cuts you off, makes rude gestures to you, shakes their fist at you, and probably you can see them saying stuff that really annoys you, upsets you, and whatever. Now, most of us will respond or react. Now, if we're responding, we're going to be thinking, do I want to engage in this? If we're reacting, we'll probably go and do the same thing back. So the secret to high performance is between E and R. It's in the gap that you create to ask yourself what kind of response will give you the outcome you want. So the secret of a good leader is to be able to define and articulate and paint a picture of what that outcome looks like. It's that picture of success. And then it's being able to work with that team and work with your people is to say, what will get us that outcome? What will get us to that picture of success? Because if we keep doing what we've always done, we probably won't get there. So it's taking the emotion out of the experience, really. It's taking the emotion out of it and putting a little bit of that neocortex thinking into how do I change this response? And that 30-day commitment is a good way to do it. Between event and response lies a choice, and how we choose to respond will guarantee our outcomes. So to change the outcome, you need to change the response. And that is the core of what we have on page 44, which is around deliberative practice. And we don't have enough time in this seminar to cover deliberative practices. It would take a good hour for us to do it. But in creating mastery, deliberative practice is one of the essential components. And you see high performance teams, high performance individuals use it. So it's about defining what performance looks like, and it's around practicing, as you can see there, the learning zone, excuse me, and the performance zone. A good example is if you wanted to walk across Niagara Falls on a tightrope, you are not going to practice walking across Niagara Falls on a tightrope by walking across them, because if you fall off, that's it. So what you would do if you were going to do it, you'd probably find a stadium somewhere and you'd run a rope across the stadium at about 1 meter or 2 meters off the ground, and you would practice walking on that rope as if you're on Niagara Falls. You might play the sound effects eventually, but when you could dance, do somersaults, do shuffle, jive, whatever you want on that rope and not fall off, then you go, I'm ready to walk across Niagara Falls. So now you finish that learning zone, you're now into the performance zone, and the chances are you'd be able to walk across Niagara Falls quite successfully. So part of what we need to keep doing, and this is where the leadership practice is important, your leadership practice is this learning zone. Your leadership practice is this learning zone to enable you to move into the performance zone. And as I say, every sports team in the world uses this, and it's a technique, and we don't have the time to cover it, but it's one of the techniques is called slicing the salami. And so it's breaking down what you want to do into its smaller slices, and then getting really good at each slice, and then putting all the slices back together, and you have a very different salami. So if you take it in rugby and passing, the passing coach will break it down to how you hold the ball, where your elbow is, what happens when you release the ball, and they'll get you really proficient in each of those little pieces, those slices, and when you put it together, you're passing in a very different way. So there's a really good diagram at the bottom there, which around the learning zone is around reflect and practice. This is important. The reflection is the same as opening up that gap between E and R. That's reflection. What kind of response do I need to get in order to get the outcome? And if you continuously keep changing your response by using things like the 30-day commitment, gradually you'll start going, wow, I do things differently. And when I'm under pressure, guess what will not happen? You won't revert to your learned behavior. You'll find you have a different behavior. One of my most favorite models is on page 45, and that's called the comfort zone. Now, I've seen this so many times when we're working with people. They go, oh, I can't do that. No, I don't want to do that. No. And basically what we're talking about here is safety. We're talking about fear. We're talking about vulnerability. We're talking about feeling unsafe to move beyond where we're comfortable. And so I've seen people so many times construct reasons why I won't move out of my comfort zone. I will stay here. Nothing wrong with that in one level, but then again, the world around us keeps moving and shifting. And we often see people who've been doing the same job for, say, 20 years. And they've not upgraded their skills. They've not changed their thinking. And one day their job is made redundant and they have no skills to go because they've spent all their time in a comfort zone. In this changing world that we're in, your role as a leader, I think, is to push yourself outside your comfort zone. That's how you grow as a leader. That's how you grow as a coach. But it also enables you to become a role model. As we said, way back at the beginning in seminar 1, you need to be a role model. It's a role model by creating a duty of care to your people, by making environments safe for people to move through the fear zone into the learning zone. So, if you take away one thing from this seminar series, remove the fear of failure by don't using the word fail. Reframe it as learning. It's fascinating. Little kids, up until about the age of 8, they've done research on this in the UK. Up until the age of around about 8, we encourage kids to try stuff, and kids keep asking why, and they're learning. And we embrace them. If they get it wrong, we hug them and kiss them and tell them how clever they are because they tried. And around about 8, research has shown, about 8, we replace that word learning with failing. So change it again. Get it back to it's safe to get it wrong, not keep getting the same thing wrong in the same way. That's not learning. But sit as a leader with your people and make it safe for them to actually not get stuff right, to trip and stumble, and then ask them, what have they learned from that? Because in the learning, and if they're feeling safe, they will change. And then you'll start to see people grow. You'll start to see people blossom. You'll start to see talent that you didn't see before come out. I've seen this 1,000 times, because the moment that somebody moves through the fear zone and into the comfort zone and into a growth zone, and they feel safe in doing that, guess what happens to their comfort zone? Their comfort zone keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, your role as a leader is to encourage people to be able to move through that and to get into a new habit, which is constantly challenging themselves, reframing. As I said in our first 2 seminars, reframing is the new super skill for leaders. So let's look at page 46. Now, on page 46, there's a whole lot of attributes there for a high-performance team. I'd be interested. There's a virtual chocolate fish available for anybody who can guess who this team describes. It's a real team. It's a Kiwi team. It's a Kiwi organization. So be clear about what you're trying to achieve. This was out of a book that was written about this organization. Be clear about what you're trying to achieve. Have a picture of success. Make sure your people know what they're trying to achieve. Break down the big goal into smaller steps on the way. Lead with authenticity. Focus on your aspirations, on your goals. Communicate, communicate, communicate. No individual is greater than the sum of the whole. And this is a core part of what makes this particular organization great. Once you have the right people, back them unconditionally. Don't ask your people to do what you don't want to do. Failure is okay, providing you learn from it and don't repeat it, which is just what we talked about. Use learning, make it safe to go into unknown, to learn and to grow. Don't confuse poor process with underperforming personnel. And your people must understand their role in the successful execution of outcomes. People need to know where they fit. They need to know what their contribution is. That is a core component of great leadership. Celebrate small wins and reinforce them. Small wins become big wins. I just see so many people focusing on just doing stuff and not celebrating stuff. It's a small stuff. It doesn't have to be big stuff. You don't have to do anything. I've always said one of the greatest contributions to celebration is the simple muffin. You bring muffins in. I have never seen any team yet who doesn't get excited about muffins to celebrate some achievement. And it's always about our people. It's the focus on our legacy that creates success. Good guess. In private chat came up Team New Zealand. Pretty close, but no. I would probably, it's a good guess. It's a very good guess, but another team. Any other teams? Any other guesses? Come on, somebody out there must know. I'll give you a further hint. It was in a book. Yes, whoever said the All Blacks, a virtual chocolate fish on its way to you. So this was out of a book called Legacy, written by Peter Kerr. And if you get a chance to read this book, it's really, really a great leadership book around building culture. And whether you're a sporting person or not, you're looking at a team or an organization that over 150 plus years has got something like an 89%, 90% winning record. And no matter how you cut that, that's a pretty impressive stat. It's an impressive team. And it's all of these things that they've got down here. Peter Kerr, an independent author writing about them, that's what he said he observed in them. So I think, as a leader, those are the kind of things that you need to look at in building your practice. So to wrap up, let's look at page 47. The basis of beginning to build your leadership practice is, what change strategies do I need to build? Now, a leader must be about change. Leadership doesn't sit in a static environment, not in the world we're in today. We mentioned in our first seminar a VUCA world, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And the way you deal with that is is OODA, observe, orient, decide, and act, and repeat. Observe, decide, orient, and act. So what change strategies are you going to build as a leader? What are my leadership priorities during change? And that's around people. It's around focusing on your people. And I would be suggesting you look at communication, authenticity, duty of care. What is the consistent message I need to deliver as a leader? What kind of leader am I? Now, if you look at myself, I like to think of myself, and people would probably tell you that I lead by inspiration and innovation. Right? Those are the two things that most people have described my leadership style, inspiration and innovation, because I can articulate a picture of what success looks like and then challenge people to find different ways to achieve it. How will I manage my well-being during change? That's really critical, because if you're the model, if you're a leadership model to your people, you need to be a person who is looking after their well-being. One of the best ways to do that is building a gratitude practice. Gratitude practices, I think, are the core of really good resilience. Now, next year, as I think Jenny will be able to tell you, we are running a seminar on Kikaha, which is a resilience and wellness practice. So if you're interested in resilience and wellness, tune in. Next year, we'll have some sessions on that, some seminars on that. So write down here for yourself, what the key takeaways have been a result of this workshop seminar for you. So that around wraps us up for Seminar 5. It wraps us up on Leadership Essentials. If you've got any thoughts or comments or anything you'd like to chat about with me, don't hesitate to give me an email. It's terry@futurepathworld.com. I'm very happy to have a conversation or a chat with you. Otherwise, I would say make it one of your objectives over the next week to begin to write out what you want your leadership practice to look like. And then in small steps, baby steps, pick one or two things you're going to do to start building a leadership practice based around all of the thinking we've got in here. And take your time to process this, because there's a lot of information in here. It's great information. It's been distilled from my experience, from the experience of other people like Dr. Randy White, Dr. Jerry Kaber, all the people that we work with. So distill that down and build it into something that is uniquely you. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful Christmas and a very happy New Year. And we'll see you again in 2025. Thanks a lot. Take care.